nuts. Now I want to show you something even more nuts. G'day everybody, it is so good to see you. Today I want to step back in time and talk about Nikon's first ever detachable lens mirrorless camera. And would you believe, it is hard to believe that these things came out before the Sony Alpha, the A7 and the A7R. Nikon beat Sony, but it wasn't quite like that, because this here is the Nikon V1. There ended up being a V2 a little bit later, but this was announced in late 2011, and I got my hands on one in Hong Kong in April of 2012. Now today I just want to go through and tell you how amazing this was for its time, but the main reason that I was interested in getting this, and it's the main reason I also purchased the A7R about a year later, was because this camera and the Sony A7R could both mount F lenses. Let's look at that. We're going to look at that a little bit later. This tiny little guy here mounting F lenses. How did they do it? Well, you've heard of the F to Z or FTZ adapter. Well, there was an F to 1, FT1 adapter. This is it right here. This is amazingly the precursor. What we have right here in my hands is the precursor to the Nikon Z series. 6 years before the Z came out, Nikon showed us exactly what they could do, and the fact that there was going to be focusing on the sensor. This camera here has phase detect as well as contrast detect focus on sensor focus. That's how it worked. So let's talk about it. So amazing. It's late 2011. I get this just a few months later in 2012 because I'm on my journey to find the most compact but detachable lens camera where I can put good quality lenses on the front. I don't really mind what size they are, but I also want it to be as compact as possible to have with me when I'm walking the streets, I'm going out, I'm at a party, because good photos can turn up anywhere. This was my world. This is how it worked. And then I was in a very fortunate position that if I took a photo and it was a good one and then I was selling it through my channels, this would be very rewarding. And I was selling at the time 10 years ago in almost, say, 10 different galleries around the city of Melbourne, turning things into calendars and books and greeting cards. All in all, I was servicing near on 100 outlets with my work. So that magical shot that can happen whenever, and I'm going to show you a shot right here called Pulp Fiction, which was an exact example of that sort of shot. That shot was taken in 2006 with the Canon S80 pocket camera. So it's not the camera that takes a great photo, it's the photo that is the great photo, not the camera that takes it. So I wanted something with a bit more manual and a bit more flexibility than a Canon S80, and I'd been looking and looking, and this was the first thing to hit the market. The Sony Alphas didn't exist at this time. Let me show you the sensor. It's tiny. It's an absolutely tiny sensor. That's it there. I got it as a kit. So this lens here is a 10 to 30 mil, and then it came with this other kit lens. And look, I love this camera. I love this camera because of the industrial design. It looks like a stormtrooper to me, and that really appealed to me. I love anything that does that sort of aesthetic. So very compact, and if we take off the lens hood, crazy. So this was great. Keep in mind, at the same time, I was running with a Nikon D800. So we've got the 10 megapixel super tiny sensor versus a 36 megapixel 35mm sensor. You can see here where this story starts to go wrong, because I'm all about image quality, and this, as much as it's portable and compact, that sensor's tiny. But ultimately what pushed me over the edge to buy it was this very one thing here. So we're going to take off that lens, and I want to show you the ridiculousness of mounting a full frame f-mount lens onto this. Now I just want to show you something interesting, how similar this device is here to the F to Z adapter. Down to the foot, down to the design, down to the shape, down to it's very, very similar. All right, we whack that on, and then lo and behold, we have an F mount. Check this out. If you've never seen this before, this is ridiculous. This is the 14 to 24 mounted on the front of this tiny, ridiculous camera. It's just about disappeared behind the lens, but fully functioning. Let me turn this on. Well, there you go. That's interesting. The lack of card was stopping the camera from functioning correctly. Now, with the card in there, off we go. We're focusing. And that focus is quick. It's quick. So here we are. It's 2011 when this comes out. We've mounted F lenses on a mirrorless camera. And the only fundamental difference between a Z and this is the sensor size. It's just got its tiny, I think 13mm by almost 9mm. It's absolutely tiny sensor. But it drives this full-size lens, so that is the reason I was excited about it. Ultimately, what ended up happening for me was the sensor size was just too small. Its low light capabilities were just not what I required for my use case. Plenty of people who were shooting this in standard sort of lighting conditions, it would have been absolutely fine. But I do a lot of shooting at night, and I love doing shooting at night. Also, the fact that it was only 10.1 megapixels simply wasn't enough for me. Well, like I said, it was up against a 36 megapixel D800. But I still find this tiny little Stormtrooper slab here, which is probably literally an inch thick. It's very square, very minimal industrial design. It's actually got a really good EVF, but it had the power to run the full F system. So you've got buttons on the back here, which are different to what we're used to. So another thing was the ergonomics. That's your shutter, and this is your aperture. But still manual control with such a ridiculously small camera. One thing this is not giving me is a live exposure view. I don't know if that's possible. I want to show you something ridiculous about this camera right now. So we're going to turn it off, take off the 14 to 24, the original. Very excited about the new Z1. This is the Nikon V1 with the 200 to 400 f4 through the range VR2. Now, you'd go to yourself, come on, this is just this tiny thing here. How can this possibly work at all? Well, here we go. I've never done this before. We're going to find out together if it can work. I'm going to go to 200mm. There we have it. Wowzers. So here is this tiny 2011 camera. Nice shutter noise. Taking a photo with this ridiculously large lens. I'm doing my best to handheld stabilize it. But what I'm finding is the focus is pretty fast between objects. So here it is, Nikon's first detachable lens mirrorless that was able to take f-mount glass. I never really used it much at all because of that sensor size, because of the ergonomics, and because of the lack of megapixels. But it was a great concept, 2011. Yet it took Nikon, sadly somewhat, another 7 years before they used what they'd learnt here with this camera and brought it to bear with the Z6 and the Z7. But isn't it interesting? We can see a lot of similar hallmarks between these cameras. Oh, and another little interesting tidbit right here is this. This camera takes the same battery, the ENEL15 from 2011. So this battery format is almost 10 years old and Nikon are still using it. So my batteries are interchangeable all the way from my Z6 and Z7 all the way back to the V1 here. Really interesting to see this as the kind of starting point, version 1, the blueprint of ultimately what we saw in the Zs. Now in a way you might say, well geez, they were kind of halfway there. What did they do? Well, I think it's safe to say they did decide to push and exploit the F-mount for as long and as far as they could. And sure, they could have come to the party a little bit sooner with the Z, considering how much technology was already there. Anyway, this is the world, this is commerce, this is capitalism, and as Mick Jagger told us, and we should all read from the hymn book of Mick Jagger, we can't always get what we want. There are so many forces at work in regards to that sort of stuff. But look, I thought this was just a really interesting little trip down memory lane in regards to the similarities between the Z and the V. This mount here, this adapter, the similarities, same battery, similarities, and in the end, the systems have a great deal in common, except for the sensor size. The other thing that I think Nikon got really right going from this to the Z was the ergonomics. They went back to the menu system and ergonomics that we all knew. This was completely bad style ergonomics that we got a lot of back in that era. It looked cool, but it was brand new. Not necessarily what we need. Alright everybody, I hope you've enjoyed this little kind of look at the origins of the Z. I think it's really interesting. I think it's hilarious that this enormous lens can be driven and mounted on this tiny little camera. I think the crop factor is 2.7, so 400 times 2. This would be equivalent to a 1000mm plus lens. Madness. But at 10 megapixels. I can get on my Z7 a 600mm lens at 19 megapixels. So in the end, they're probably similar when it comes to pixel density. Yes, they are. I think they might be. Of course, the Z7 has a more modern sensor and does a whole lot of things way better. Oh, I forgot to say, also it shot video, 1080p video, which I think is pretty cool for way back then. Alright everybody, well, thank you so much for being here. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think around all of this. Just interesting to see Nikon's iterating over the years. Let me know what your thoughts are. As always, it's been so lovely to see you, and if this is your first time here, very lovely to meet you. I look forward to seeing you again, so please subscribe, please share, please like, and you can see over 200 more videos down there right now. Alright, well, I will catch you later. Let me see if I can take a photo of you before we go. They're rolling the credits on me. Oh, get that ENEL15, what a ridiculous name. Why do they come up with these names? God damn it, this is a heavy lens. I need to use it again. Should I take it out? Let me know in the comments if I should take this 400mm out for a spin.